Welcome to episode 3 of Bands and Humans podcast. I'm your host, Bands, and you are the humans. So, the topic of today's episode is metaphysics, and basically just what metaphysics is, where it comes from, who's involved in terms of the philosophical thinkers, and also any other intricacies that might pertain to it. So, let's get started. And where we start is just basically finding out what metaphysics is, and it can be defined as a branch of philosophy that deals with the first principles of things, including abstract concepts such as being, knowing, identity, time, and space. And that there is a simple definition of what metaphysics is. And when I say simple, I really mean simple. I found that definition off of Wikipedia, and the reason why I chose that definition is so that people who aren't really accustomed to this type of knowledge or this type of thinking can easily relate to what I'm trying to explain or relay here. So I don't want to chase people away. So for now, that's the definition, and then we're just gonna get a bit more intricate and a bit more complex with this definition as we go along. So now I want to break the word down so that we can get into the etymology of what the word metaphysics means. And it's a word that comes from Greece, and in the Greek language, it means higher or beyond. But in the English language, it is used as a prefix to supplement the concept that comes after it. So when you put the words together, it's basically telling you that it's the higher study of what physics does. And physics is basically a scientific study of how the universe behaves. So it tells you that it's the higher or the beyond. It goes beyond what physics already does. I want to contextualize that a bit from Rene Descartes' standpoint, who is one of the greatest thinkers to have ever lived. And in one of his writings, he explores how philosophy and metaphysics work to bring greater understanding to each other as thinking tools. So, in one of his writings, he makes this beautiful analogy on how philosophy is and how it works, and he compares it to a tree. And he states that so all philosophy is like a tree whose roots are metaphysics. The trunk is the physics, and the branches that come out of this trunk are all the other sciences, which are reduced to three main ones, namely medicine, mechanics, and morals. I mean, the highest and most perfect morality, which presupposes an entire knowledge of the other sciences, is the last degree of wisdom. And that is Rene Descartes on how he believes that metaphysics fits into the realm of science. And another philosophical thinker that we could refer to is Aristotle, who defined metaphysics as the principle of being. And if you guys are interested, I'm sure you could find multiple writings of his either on the internet or in bookstores. It's quite easily accessible. Moving on from that, I found a very interesting piece of information, and it's that Plato is known as the father of metaphysics, which is quite interesting because he's another Greek philosopher, and most of the more popular philosophers are from Greece or Europe. And it's quite interesting because the Greek scholars went to Egypt to go learn from the Egyptians, or maybe from Kemet, as was known back then, ancient Egypt. And they would obtain their knowledge about mathematics, physics, astrology, numerology from the Egyptians. And so you ask yourself, how can someone who learned or obtained specific knowledge about something call or be considered the father of something if they were taught by someone else? But I guess they kind of have the rights to do that because they institutionalized what we learn today, and we don't know who taught them because it wasn't recorded, so we don't have a strong enough case to question that title. And there is a philosophy that was created by Plato, and it's called realism. And in realism, they claim that certain characteristics can exist in the world without mind and language to perceive it or interpret it. So, for instance, like the color red or the quality of redness can exist independent of mind and language. So, I tend to question that, where it's like, what what is redness if we don't interpret or perceive it in some type of way? It's the whole concept of God. Would God be what he, she, or it is without us having to comprehend and perceive them as that which they characterize themselves as? It's quite interesting, and that's what those are the types of questions that metaphysics opens up to, where it's like questions about God and questions about time, space, where are we and when are we? And if you guys remember from the first episode, I said that there are six fundamental questions to philosophy, and which kind of open up other doors to it. And this is what's happening now. It's just a practice or an exercise of the mind that opens up more gateways to other questions and other philosophies as well. As an exercise for yourself or amongst your friends as well, you could bring up that question of whether things even exist outside. Forget us perceiving it. Does anything exist? Is anything real? And that brings us to the simulation theory. And that is a concept that basically embodies what the whole movie The Matrix was about. Like, are we in the real world or in the dream world? And other concepts have been, like those such concepts have been explored in other films. It's this theory of us existing in this world, in this plane. Because if you had to think about it, it's like, where do we go when we dream? Where do our dreams exist? When do they exist? Because sometimes our dreams can deceive time, where it's like you have a whole dream and maybe like 5 years go by in your dream, but you've only been asleep for an hour or two in the real world. And here, I don't know what the real world is, but you've only been here for an hour sleeping, but in your dream, 5 years have gone past. So it's like, how do we understand? How do we gain an understanding into that? Because I also have a piece of writing in which I kind of try to explore an understanding or try to come to one. And what I wrote was that we only understand and have a relationship with our surroundings from the basis of our five senses, which ultimately dictates our perceivable reality. Meaning that we only understand the world from the point of what we can see and experience, really, what we can experience, and that becomes our reality. I can experience another human being based on the fact that I can hear them, I can see them, I can touch them, I can taste, but I wouldn't I wouldn't recommend going around licking people to taste them, but you can if if you're brave enough. And and so from the point of the five senses, which are touch, taste, smell, sight, and hearing, we sort of augment a reality. And what I mean by that is that our mind generates a reality for us based on that understanding. Because if someone that's blind, their reality is not the same as your reality. And from someone who is deaf, it's not the same, because you're able, if you have all your five senses, you're able to engage with the world or with your surroundings on a different level or on another level compared to the person that can't. So that in itself is what an augmented reality is. Immanuel Kant, who is a German philosopher, who wrote a lot about human reason and modern thought, he wrote about and categorized how the mind organizes our experiences. And the first way is how the world appears. And that there is based on our five senses and how we engage with the environment and our surroundings. And the second way is how one thinks about the world. And that there is a very important point because of how then the world can be shaped for someone. Can you imagine the factors that come into play when your mind organizes its experiences based on how you think of the world? Language can be a factor, a huge factor in that. Some people don't have certain words to categorize experiences, and so their mind never internalizes certain things. I know that in the English language, you have a different word for specific colors like blue and green, but in my language, isiZulu, which is from South Africa, we have one word for for both those colors, and then we categorize from there. So ubhlaza, which is generally recognized as green, but then you have to define whether you're talking about green like grass or green like the sky. So that's what it means, and that's the crazy thing about language, is that in each language is unique in its own senses, and how your language is used or how your language is developed, it also augments reality. And words are vibrations. Words are vibrations, are the first principle of the universe. Everything is emotion. We know that when we use specific words, we also bring out certain things into reality. It's like the word abracadabra, which is Hebrew for I create as I speak. From Kemetic philosophy as well, we know that the first, or from the Metuneta, we know that the principle there states that first there was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And from the Bible, if you contextualize that, the Bible talks about how God, when God was creating, he used words. He, she, it used words. Let there be light. And there was light. So we need to think about that and how impactful words and language can be. So that's why I kind of challenged the whole concept of realism, and how they say that certain things do exist independent of mind and language. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. This has been a great episode on Metaphysics. I will catch you guys in the next episode. This has been Bands and the Humans podcast. I am Bands. You are the humans.